The front door clicked shut with a sound so quiet it should have been nothing. But standing in the middle of his kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, Ethan Cole felt that soft click like a gunshot through his chest. Lena's truck was already pulling down the long gravel drive, taillights disappearing into the pre-dawn dark. On the counter sat her keys, her employee badge from the ranch office, and a single handwritten note that began with two words he'd never expected to read. I'm done. 4 years. 4 years of her steady presence, her quiet efficiency, the way she kept his entire world running without ever asking for credit. And he'd never once stopped to wonder what would happen if she left. Now, watching those taillights fade to nothing, Ethan realized he'd been a fool. The woman he'd taken for granted wasn't just leaving his employment, she was walking out of his life, and he had no idea how to stop her. Before we dive into this story, do me a favor, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. The sky over Montana was still more black than blue when Ethan stepped out onto the porch, his breath fogging in the cold March air. The ranch stretched out before him, 2,000 acres of rolling grassland and timber that had been in his family for 3 generations. At 34, he'd been running it solo for almost 5 years now, ever since the accident that took his wife and left him a widower with a 3-year-old son. He didn't think about those days much anymore. Couldn't afford to. The ranch didn't care about grief, and neither did a young boy who needed his father to hold it together. So Ethan had learned to compartmentalize. Work came first, his son Mason came second. Everything else, emotions, connections, the messy, unpredictable parts of being human, got shoved down deep where they couldn't interfere. It had worked. Mostly. Dad? Ethan turned to find Mason standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas, dark hair sticking up at odd angles. The kid was 7 now, all sharp elbows and questions, with his mother's brown eyes and Ethan's stubborn chin. You're up early, Ethan said. Lena's gone. The words landed harder than they should have. Ethan kept his expression neutral. She'll be back Monday. No. Mason's voice was small, uncertain. Her stuff's gone. From the cottage. Ethan's jaw tightened. The cottage, a small guest house about 50 yards from the main ranch house, had been Lena's space for the past 4 years. She'd moved in when Mason was 3, hired initially as a housekeeper but quickly becoming something more essential. The person who made sure Mason got to school on time, who kept the house from falling into chaos, who managed the impossible task of keeping Ethan's life running smoothly while he buried himself in ranch work. Go get dressed, Ethan said quietly. I'll make breakfast. Mason hesitated, then disappeared back inside. Ethan stood on the porch a moment longer, staring out at the empty driveway where Lena's truck usually sat. I'm done. He'd read the note 3 times, searching for more, an explanation, a reason, anything beyond those 2 blunt words. But that was all she'd left him. That and a sensation he couldn't quite name, something uncomfortable lodged beneath his ribs. Inside, the kitchen felt too quiet. Usually by this hour, Lena would already have coffee brewing, would be pulling together Mason's lunch or prepping something for dinner. The absence of her presence was a silence that pressed against his ears. Ethan made eggs and toast, movements mechanical. Mason appeared, dressed but subdued, and ate without his usual chatter. Is she coming back? The boy asked finally. I don't know, Ethan admitted, because lying to Mason had never worked, and he wasn't about to start now. Did you make her mad? The question hit closer than Ethan liked. Why would you think that? Mason shrugged, pushing eggs around his plate. You make people mad sometimes, not on purpose. You don't notice stuff. What stuff? I don't know. Stuff. Mason looked up, and there was something too old in his eyes, some awareness that 7-year-olds shouldn't have. Mom used to say you lived in your head too much, that you were good at ranching but bad at people. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Your mom said that? Before she died. I remember some things. Mason's voice went quieter. Lena never said it, but sometimes she'd get this look, like she was tired of being invisible. She wasn't invisible. Yeah, she was. Mason stood, carrying his plate to the sink. You never even looked at her, Dad. Not really. The kid headed upstairs. leaving Ethan alone in the too-quiet kitchen with the uncomfortable truth that his 7-year-old son saw things more clearly than he did. By noon, Ethan had thrown himself into work with an intensity that would have impressed even him on a normal day. Fences needed mending, cattle needed checking, equipment needed maintenance. The ranch provided endless excuses to avoid thinking about the empty cottage or the note or the hollow feeling in his chest. He was in the north pasture, wrestling with a broken post, when his foreman, Ray Martinez, rode up on horseback. "Heard Lena quit," Ray said without preamble. Ethan didn't look up. News travels fast. "Mason told my daughter when she picked him up for school." Ray dismounted, studying Ethan with the kind of frank assessment that came from 20 years of friendship. "You gonna tell me what happened?" "Nothing happened. She left a note, said she was done." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Ray was quiet for a moment, and Ethan could feel him thinking, choosing his words. Ray was good at that, thinking before speaking, something Ethan had never quite mastered. "You know," Ray said slowly, "my wife mentioned Lena seemed different lately. Quieter. Like something was weighing on her." "She was always quiet." "Not like this. Maria said it was like watching someone make a decision they didn't want to make." Ray paused. "Said Lena looked sad." Ethan finally looked up. "She didn't seem sad to me." "Yeah, well," Ray's expression shifted into something almost pitying. "That's kind of the problem, isn't it?" Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, frowning at the unfamiliar number, then at the text message. "This is Lena. Please don't try to contact me. I'll send my final paycheck information via email. Take care of Mason." The message felt like a door slamming shut. "What is it?" Ray asked. Ethan showed him the phone. Ray read the message, his frown deepening. "Cold." "Yeah. That doesn't sound like her." "No," Ethan agreed quietly. "It doesn't." Because Lena, in all the years he'd known her, had never been cold. Reserved, maybe. Private. But there had always been warmth underneath, in the way she talked to Mason, in the small gestures she made without thinking, in the care she put into the life she'd built around them. "You should go talk to her," Ray said. "She just told me not to contact her." "Since when do you follow orders?" Ethan almost smiled. "She's got a right to quit if she wants." "Sure she does. But you've got a right to know why." Ray swung back onto his horse. "Unless you don't actually want to know. Unless you're fine with her just disappearing and never figuring out what the hell happened." He rode off before Ethan could answer, leaving him alone with the broken fence post and the growing certainty that he'd missed something crucial, some warning sign he should have seen, but didn't. That evening, after Mason was in bed, Ethan found himself standing outside the cottage. The lights were off, the windows dark. He knew she wasn't there. Her truck was gone, her presence erased. But he needed to see it for himself. He used his key to let himself in. The cottage was small. One bedroom, a bathroom, a living area with a kitchenette. Lena had always kept it neat, but now it was empty in a way that felt final. The furniture was still there, came with the place, but all her personal touches were gone. No books on the shelves, no photos on the walls, no shoes by the door. In the bedroom, the closet stood open and empty. The bed was stripped, the mattress bare. Ethan stood in the center of the room, trying to remember what it had looked like when she lived here. But the truth was, he'd barely ever been inside. Lena had always come to the main house, had always existed in his space rather than him entering hers. He'd never thought about that before, never questioned the dynamic. On the small table by the window, he found something she'd left behind, a photograph, half tucked under a stack of old ranch newsletters. He pulled it out. It was from 2 summers ago, taken at the county fair. Mason was grinning at the camera, holding a blue ribbon from the junior livestock show. Lena stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, smiling in that quiet way she had. Ethan wasn't in the frame. He'd been the one taking the picture. He stared at the photo, really looking at Lena for maybe the first time. She'd been 30 then, though she'd always seemed both younger and older somehow. Light brown hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail. Hazel eyes that noticed everything. An easy, unforced prettiness that he'd somehow never registered, because he'd never looked at her as anything other than the woman who worked for him. "You never even looked at her, Dad." "Not really." Mason's words echoed in his head, and Ethan felt something uncomfortable unfurl in his chest. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of it. He pocketed the photograph and left the cottage, locking the door behind him. The weekend passed in a strange blur. Ethan tried to maintain normalcy for Mason's sake, but the house felt wrong without Lena in it. Small things kept tripping him up. Realizing he didn't know where Mason's school forms were. Discovering they were out of milk because Lena always restocked on Thursdays. Coming downstairs Monday morning to find no coffee made and no breakfast started. Mason handled it better than Ethan did, with the adaptability of children, but even the kids seemed subdued. By Tuesday, Ethan had hired a cleaning service to come twice a week and rearranged his schedule to handle school drop-offs and pickups. It was manageable, technically, but it felt like trying to run the ranch with half his crew missing. Everything just a little harder, a little less smooth, the edges rougher than they should be. He was in the ranch office, trying to make sense of the household budget Lena had always managed, when Ray appeared in the doorway. "You busy?" Ethan gestured at the spreadsheet on his computer screen. "Depends on your definition." "Got someone I want you to meet." Ray stepped aside, revealing a woman Ethan had never seen before. "This is Victoria Hale, friend of Maria's from college. She's visiting from Seattle for a few weeks." Victoria stepped forward with the kind of confident smile that suggested she was used to making good first impressions. She was striking, tall, polished, with dark hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that assessed him quickly before extending a hand. "Ethan Cole," she said. "I've heard a lot about you." Her handshake was firm and professional. Ethan stood, suddenly aware that he was in work clothes covered in dust and probably smelled like cattle. "All good things, I hope," he said, falling into the automatic politeness his mother had drilled into him. "Mostly." Victoria's smile turned wry. "Ray's been telling me about the ranch. It's impressive." "It's a lot of work." "The best things usually are." She glanced around the office, taking in the organized chaos. "I run a consulting firm in Seattle, corporate strategy mostly, so I appreciate what it takes to manage something this size." Ray, who'd been watching the exchange with poorly concealed interest, cleared his throat. "Victoria's a bit of a ranching enthusiast. Her grandfather had a place in Wyoming. I thought you might show her around, give her the tour." Ethan shot Ray a look that promised they'd be having words later. "Sure, I've got about an hour before I need to pick up Mason." "Perfect," Victoria said smoothly. "I promise not to slow you down." They left Ray in the office, stepping out into the afternoon sun. Ethan grabbed his hat from the porch and led Victoria toward the barn, trying to remember the last time he'd given someone a tour of the ranch. Years, probably, since before his wife died. "So," Victoria said as they walked, "Ray tells me you're doing this alone. The ranch and single fatherhood." "Ray talks too much." She laughed. "He cares about you, it's obvious. He's a meddler." "Maybe, but sometimes meddling is just another word for paying attention." She paused to look out over the pasture, where cattle grazed in the distance. "This really is beautiful. You can see why your family held on to it." 3 generations, Ethan said. "Sometimes I think it holds on to us more than the other way around." "Duty and legacy." Victoria nodded. "I get that. My family had expectations too. Law school, corporate track, marriage to the right kind of person." She smiled slightly. "I managed the career part, at least." There was something practiced about her openness, Ethan thought, like she'd learned to share just enough to seem genuine without actually revealing anything important. He recognized the technique because he used it himself. They spent the next hour touring the facilities. Victoria asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely interested, and Ethan found himself relaxing slightly. She was easy to talk to in the way that strangers sometimes were. No history, no expectations, no complicated emotions lurking underneath. When he dropped her back at the ranch office, she turned to him with that same confident smile. "Thank you for the tour, and for indulging Ray's matchmaking." Ethan blinked. "Is that what this was?" "Oh, absolutely. Maria and Ray have been plotting this since I mentioned I'd be in Montana." She didn't seem embarrassed, just amused. "I hope that doesn't bother you. I told them I wasn't looking for anything, but they were insistent." "They're persistent," Ethan agreed. "The thing is," Victoria said, her tone shifting slightly, "I actually enjoyed this. You're interesting, Ethan Cole, and this place is remarkable. So if you ever want to grab dinner or coffee, no pressure, no expectations, just two adults having a conversation. I'd like that. She pulled out her phone, offering it to him. Ethan hesitated for just a moment, then entered his number. I'll text you, Victoria said. Think about it. She left in a rental car, and Ethan stood in the driveway watching her go, trying to figure out what he was feeling. Not attraction, exactly, but maybe curiosity. Maybe the faint stirring of something that had been dormant for so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Inside the office, Ray was grinning like he'd won something. Don't start, Ethan warned. I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying, she's smart, she's successful, she's single. When's the last time you even looked at a woman? I look at women as people, not inventory. Ray's expression sobered. Look, I know you've got your reasons for keeping people at arm's length, but it's been almost 5 years, Ethan. You're allowed to move on. This isn't about moving on. Then what is it about? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He grabbed his keys and headed out to pick up Mason, leaving Ray's question hanging in the air. Well, that night, after Mason was asleep, Ethan sat on the porch with a beer and tried to think about Victoria. She was objectively attractive, accomplished, the kind of woman who'd probably fit well into his life if he let her. But his mind kept drifting to the photograph he'd found in the cottage, to Lena's hand on Mason's shoulder, that quiet smile, the way she'd looked at his son like he mattered. He pulled out his phone, staring at her last message. Please don't try to contact me. His thumb hovered over the screen, and for a long moment he considered texting her anyway, asking her what happened, what he'd missed, why she'd left without giving him a chance to fix whatever he'd broken. But in the end, he put the phone away. Lena had made her choice. She had a right to that, even if it felt like losing something he hadn't known he had until it was gone. Over the next few days, Victoria texted him twice, once with an article about sustainable ranching practices, once with a photo of a sunset she'd seen on a hike. The messages were friendly, low pressure, exactly what she'd promised. Ethan responded because it seemed rude not to, and because if he was honest, the attention was novel. For years, his entire world had been the ranch and Mason and the careful distance he kept from anything resembling emotional risk. On Thursday, she texted, "There's a decent Italian place in town. Dinner Friday? My treat." He stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, "Can I bring my kid?" The response came quickly. "Absolutely. I'd love to meet him." Friday evening, Ethan found himself in a restaurant he'd driven past 100 times but never entered, sitting across from Victoria while Mason worked his way through a plate of spaghetti with single-minded focus. "So, Mason," Victoria said, "your dad tells me you're in 2nd grade. What's your favorite subject?" Mason looked up, tomato sauce on his chin. "Recess," and she laughed, and it sounded genuine. "Fair answer. What about when you're actually in the classroom?" "Science, I guess. We're learning about weather." "That's perfect for Montana. You get all the extremes here." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her attention fully on Mason in a way that seemed effortless. "Have you ever seen a tornado?" "No, but Lena said she saw one once when she was a kid, in Kansas." The name landed in the middle of the table like a stone. Ethan felt his shoulders tense. Victoria's expression didn't change. "Lena?" "She used to live with us," Mason said matter-of-factly, "in the cottage, but she left." "I'm sorry to hear that." Victoria's tone was gentle, careful. "Were you close?" Mason shrugged, but his eyes went distant. "She was nice. She never yelled even when I did dumb stuff. And she made really good grilled cheese." "The important things," Victoria said lightly, steering the conversation back to safer ground. "So besides weather, what else are you into?" The rest of dinner passed smoothly. Victoria was good with Mason, attentive but not overbearing, asking questions that actually seemed to interest her. And Mason, usually shy with strangers, warmed to her gradually. On the drive home, Mason was quiet, staring out the window at the dark landscape rolling past. "You like her?" Ethan asked. "She's okay." A pause. "She's not Lena, though." "I know. Is she going to be your girlfriend?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "I don't know. We just met." "But you like her." "I don't not like her." Ethan glanced at his son. "Would it bother you if I did?" "Have a girlfriend." Mason considered this seriously. Mom's been gone a long time. I don't remember her much anymore, except in pictures. His voice got smaller. Sometimes I feel bad about that. Ethan's chest tightened. You don't have to feel bad. You were little. I know, but still. Mason looked at him. I think it'd be okay if you had a girlfriend, as long as she's nice to us. And as long as she's not just pretending. Pretending what? To like us. To want to be here. Mason turned back to the window. Lena never pretended. Even when she was sad, she was real. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Ethan wondered when his 7-year-old had gotten so perceptive and why it felt like the kid understood things about human nature that Ethan was still figuring out. That weekend, Victoria came by the ranch again, this time bringing coffee and pastries from a bakery in town. She sat on the porch with Ethan while Mason played in the yard, and they talked about nothing in particular, her work in Seattle, his challenges with the ranch, the strange liminal space of being in Montana in early spring. You're easy to be around, Victoria said at one point, her tone thoughtful. You don't perform. A lot of people perform. I don't have the energy for it, Ethan admitted. I like that. It's refreshing. She watched Mason chase the dog across the lawn. He's a great kid. You're doing something right. I'm doing my best, which some days doesn't feel like enough. That's parenting, I think, at least from what I've observed. Victoria hesitated, then added, Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. The woman Mason mentioned, Lena. Ray said she worked for you. Ethan felt his defenses rise automatically. She did, for 4 years. And she just left? Out of nowhere? Apparently it wasn't out of nowhere to her. I just didn't see it coming. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her gaze steady. Do you miss her? The question landed harder than it should have. Ethan found himself looking out at the ranch, at the familiar landscape, trying to put words to something he hadn't fully examined. The house feels wrong without her, he said finally. Things don't run the way they used to. Mason asked about her. So yeah, I guess I miss what she did, the role she filled. That's not what I asked. He looked at Victoria, found her watching him with something that might have been sympathy or understanding or both. I don't know, he admitted. I'm not good at this. Feelings, I guess. I know the ranch, I know cattle, I know how to fix a fence or balance a budget, but people? I've never been good with people. You're good with me. You're easy. You don't ask for anything complicated. Not yet, Victoria said, and there was something almost sad in her smile. But Ethan, if you want my unsolicited advice, and I'm going to give it anyway, whatever you're feeling about Lena, you should probably figure that out before you try to figure out what you feel about anyone else. Why? Because unfinished business has a way of sabotaging new beginnings. And because it's not fair to either of us if half your heart is somewhere else. Before Ethan could respond, Mason called out from the yard, and the moment passed. But Victoria's words stayed with him, needling at something uncomfortable in his chest. That night, alone in the house after Mason had gone to bed, Ethan pulled out the photograph again. He studied Lena's face, trying to remember specific moments, specific conversations. But what came back were impressions more than memories. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of her humming while she worked, the way she'd looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention, like she was seeing something he couldn't. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thanks for today. You're easy to be around too. He typed back, anytime. Then he set the phone down and sat in the quiet house, surrounded by the ghost of Lena's presence, and tried to figure out what the hell he was doing, and why, when he closed his eyes, it wasn't Victoria's face he saw, but hazel eyes, and a quiet smile, and a woman who'd been right there beside him for 4 years while he looked everywhere else. The following Tuesday brought rain, not the gentle spring kind, but the cold, slanting variety that turned the ranch roads to mud and made everything twice as hard. Ethan spent most of the morning in the south pasture, checking on a pregnant heifer that Ray had flagged as high risk. By the time he got back to the house, his clothes were soaked through, and his mood was worse. Mason was at the kitchen table, homework spread out in front of him, looking frustrated. "Where's the protractor?" he asked, without looking up. Ethan stared at him. "The what?" "The protractor. For math. It's supposed to be in my school supplies, but I can't find it. Did you check your backpack?" "Yes, Dad. I checked everywhere. Mason's voice had that edge that meant he was close to tears. Lena always knew where stuff was. The words hit harder than they should have. Ethan pulled off his wet jacket, trying to think. We'll get you a new one. I'll run to the store. I need it for homework that's due tomorrow. Then we'll go now. They drove to town in tense silence, the rain drumming on the truck's roof. The office supply store was nearly empty, fluorescent lights too bright after the gray afternoon. Ethan found the protractor while Mason wandered the aisles, touching notebooks and pens with the kind of focus kids used when they were trying not to think about something else. At the checkout, the clerk, an older woman Ethan vaguely recognized, smiled at Mason. Getting ready for the school year? We're already in school, Mason said flatly. Oh, of course, I just meant... She looked flustered. Well, you have a good day. In the truck, Mason was quiet again. Ethan started the engine but didn't pull out of the parking lot. You want to talk about it? He asked. About what? Whatever's bothering you. Mason stared out the window. Everything's different now. Like, we used to have routines and stuff just worked. Now it's all weird and hard and nothing's where it should be. I know, I'm trying. I know you're trying. Mason's voice cracked slightly. But trying isn't the same as it actually working. And I know I'm not supposed to miss Lena because she was just the housekeeper, but I do miss her. She felt like... He stopped, struggling for words. Like what? Like part of us. Like family, kind of. Even though she wasn't. He looked at Ethan finally, his eyes red. Why did she leave? Did we do something wrong? Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. You didn't do anything wrong, buddy. I promise. Then why? I don't know. Sometimes people just... They need to make changes. It's not always about what we did or didn't do. That's a grown-up answer. It doesn't actually explain anything. The kid was right. Ethan ran a hand through his wet hair, searching for better words. Lena was here for a long time, 4 years. And maybe she needed something different, something we couldn't give her. That's not your fault. It's just how things work out sometimes. It sucks. Yeah, Ethan agreed quietly. It really does. They drove home through the rain, and Ethan thought about all the ways he'd failed to see what was right in front of him, not just with Lena, but with his own kid, who'd been holding everything together while Ethan buried himself in work and routine and the comfortable numbness of not feeling too much. That evening, after Mason finished his homework and went to bed, Ethan found himself standing in the kitchen with his phone in his hand. He'd pulled up Lena's contact information, the cursor blinking in the message field. He typed, Mason misses you. Then he deleted it. Too manipulative, using his kid as leverage. He tried again. Can we talk? Deleted that too. She'd explicitly asked him not to contact her. Finally he typed, I need to understand what happened. His thumb hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then he locked the phone and put it away. Lena had drawn a boundary. He had to respect that, even if it killed him not knowing. The rain continued through the night, steady and relentless, and Ethan lay awake listening to it, thinking about everything he'd taken for granted and all the ways silence could be its own kind of answer. Victoria texted him Wednesday morning. How's the week treating you? He responded honestly. Rough. You? Same. Work drama. Want to grab lunch and commiserate? They met at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since dawn. Victoria was already there when Ethan arrived, looking polished despite claiming to have had a rough week. You look tired, she said as he slid into the booth across from her. Mason's having a hard time, adjusting. To Lena being gone? Ethan nodded. The waitress came by and they ordered without looking at the menus. When she left, Victoria leaned back, studying him. You know what I think? She said. I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you're stuck. You're not moving forward because you haven't dealt with what's behind you. She held up a hand before he could protest. And I'm not just talking about Lena. I'm talking about all of it. Your wife, your grief, the walls you've built to keep yourself functioning. You're so good at managing, Ethan. Managing the ranch, managing Mason, managing your emotions. But management isn't the same as living. That's pretty heavy for lunch conversation. You asked me to grab lunch and commiserate. I'm commiserating. Her expression softened. Look, I like you. You're smart. You're decent. You clearly love your kid. But I'm not interested in being someone's distraction. And I think that's what I'd be right now, a convenient reason not to deal with the harder stuff. That's not fair, isn't it? Victoria's gaze didn't waver. Be honest. When you think about moving forward, dating, whatever you want to call it, are you thinking about me? Or are you thinking about proving something to yourself? About checking a box that says you're fine, you've moved on, you're capable of normal human connection? Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she was right, and they both knew it. I don't know how to do this, he admitted finally. The emotional stuff, I'm not built for it. Everyone's built for it. You've just spent years convincing yourself you're not. Victoria reached across the table, touching his hand briefly. Here's my advice, for what it's worth. Find Lena, talk to her. Figure out what actually happened and what you actually feel. Because until you do that, you're going to be stuck in this limbo, and that's not fair to you or Mason or anyone else who might want to be part of your life. She doesn't want to talk to me. Did she say that, or are you assuming? She texted me to not contact her. So, contact her anyway. Sometimes people say one thing when they mean another. Sometimes they put up walls because they're hurt, not because they actually want to be left alone. Victoria pulled her hand back. Or don't. Keep moving forward the way you have been, but don't drag me or anyone else into your mess until you're actually ready to deal with it. Their food arrived, and they ate in a silence that wasn't quite uncomfortable but wasn't easy either. When they finished, Victoria insisted on paying, and they walked out to the parking lot together. For what it's worth, she said, I think she probably had feelings for you. Women don't usually walk away from stable jobs and kids they care about unless something bigger is at stake. And I think you probably had feelings for her too, whether you knew it or not. Based on what? Based on the way you talk about her. Like, she was the sun, and you never thought to look directly at it until it was gone. Victoria smiled sadly. I've been the woman men settle for after they lose the one they actually wanted. I'm not doing that again. So figure your stuff out, Ethan. Then maybe we can try this for real. She drove away, leaving Ethan standing in the parking lot under a gray sky, feeling like he'd just been simultaneously rejected and given the best advice he'd heard in years. That weekend, Ray and Maria invited Ethan and Mason over for dinner. It was clearly a setup. Maria had made Ethan's favorite pot roast, and their daughter, Sophia, kept Mason occupied with video games in the other room while the adults sat around the kitchen table. Victoria called me, Maria said without preamble. Ethan sighed. Of course she did. She said you were a good man with too much baggage, and that she hoped you'd figure it out. Maria exchanged a glance with Ray. She also said she thought you were in love with Lena and just too stubborn to admit it. She said that? Not in those exact words, but that was the gist. Maria leaned forward, her expression serious. Ethan, we've known you for a long time, since before Sarah died, and we've watched you shut down piece by piece, turning yourself into this machine that runs on duty and routine. It's not healthy, and it's not what Sarah would have wanted. Don't bring Sarah into this. Someone needs to. Ray's voice was firm. Because you've been using her death as an excuse to not feel anything for almost 5 years. And yeah, losing her was terrible. We know. We were there. But you're still alive, and Mason's still growing up. And at some point, you have to decide if you're going to actually live or just go through the motions. Ethan felt anger flare, hot and defensive. You think I don't know that? You think I'm not trying? I think you're trying in all the wrong ways, Maria said gently. You hired someone to replace Lena's duties. You went on dates with Victoria because we pushed you. You're doing all the things that look like moving forward, but your heart isn't in any of it. And the one person who actually mattered, who actually fit into your life in a real way, you let her walk away without a fight. She left. That was her choice. And you respected it, which is noble or cowardly depending on how you look at it. Ray stood, pacing to the window. Did you ever ask yourself why she left? Really ask, not just accept the surface answer. She said she was done. Done with what? The job? The house? Or done waiting for you to see her as something other than hired help? Ray turned back to face him. Lena worked for you for 4 years, Ethan. 4 years of living 50 yards away, seeing you every day, taking care of your kid like he was her own. And in all that time, did you ever once ask her about herself? Her life? Her dreams? What she wanted? The question landed like a punch. Ethan tried to remember specific conversations with Lena, personal ones that went beyond logistics and schedules. He came up empty. That's what I thought, Ray said quietly. You treated her like a very efficient appliance, and maybe she was okay with that for a while. But people can't stay invisible forever, especially when they're in love with someone who doesn't even see them. You don't know that she was in love with me. Everyone knew, Maria said. Everyone except you. The way she looked at you, the way she organized her whole life around yours and Mason's, the way she'd light up when you actually noticed something she'd done. It was obvious, painful, honestly. Watching her hope and watching you just not see it. Ethan felt like the ground had shifted under him. If it was so obvious, why didn't anyone say anything? Would you have listened? Ray asked. Be honest. If I'd come to you a year ago and said, hey, I think Lena has feelings for you, what would you have done? Ethan didn't have to think hard. I would have told you that you were wrong, that she was an employee and nothing more. Exactly, so we stayed out of it. Figured maybe eventually you'd pull your head out of your ass and see what was right in front of you. Ray's expression softened. But then she left, and you still didn't get it. You went on a date with Victoria instead of going after the woman who actually knew you, who knew Mason, who'd been part of your life in a real, daily, intimate way. Intimate is a strong word. Is it? She lived on your property. She knew how you took your coffee, what nightmares Mason had, when you were stressed even if you didn't say so. She knew the ranch, the rhythms of your life, the 1,000 small details that make a person real. Maria's voice was kind but firm. That's intimacy, Ethan. Maybe not romantic, but definitely real. And somewhere along the way, I think it became romantic for her, and I think, if you're honest with yourself, maybe for you too. Ethan stood abruptly, needing to move. I didn't ask for this. The analysis, the judgment, we're not judging you, Maria interrupted. We're trying to help you, because we love you and we want you to be happy, and we think you're sabotaging yourself. By what? Respecting Lena's wishes? Trying to move on? By not fighting for something that mattered. Ray's voice was steady. Look, if Lena was just the housekeeper, just an employee who decided to quit, fine, move on. But if she was more than that, if she meant something to you that you're only now starting to realize, then you owe it to yourself and to her to figure that out. From the other room came the sound of Mason and Sophia laughing at something on the TV. The normalcy of it felt jarring against the weight of the conversation. I don't know what she was, Ethan admitted quietly. I don't know what I feel. All I know is the house feels wrong without her, and Mason asks about her, and I keep finding myself thinking about moments that didn't seem important at the time, but maybe were. Then find her, Maria said simply. Talk to her. Worst case, you get closure. Best case, you get something real. And if she doesn't want to talk to me, then at least you tried. At least you didn't just let her disappear because it was easier than dealing with complicated feelings. Ray sat back down. You're a good man, Ethan, but being good isn't enough if you're not also brave. And sometimes bravery means risking rejection or discomfort or all the messy stuff you've been avoiding. Ethan looked at his friends, people who'd known him through the best and worst of his life, who'd stood by him when Sarah died, who'd watched him slowly turn into someone he barely recognized. I don't know if I can do this, he said. You can, Maria assured him. You're just scared, which is normal. But you've done harder things. You've buried a wife and raised a kid and kept a ranch running. You can have one difficult conversation. Where is she? Do you know? Maria and Ray exchanged a glance. She's staying with her sister in Billings, Maria said. About 2 hours from here. Sophia got the address from her when they texted last week. Mason's been texting her? Sophia has. Lena asked her to check in on Mason, make sure he was doing okay. Sophia showed me the messages. Lena sounds sad and worried about you both, but also resolute, like she made a decision she's sticking to no matter how much it hurts. Ethan absorbed this information, feeling pieces click into place. She cares about him. About us. Of course she does. That was never the question. Ray leaned forward. The question is whether you care about her the same way. Not as an employee. Not as a convenient presence, but as a person who matters. Who you'd miss even if every practical thing she did could be replaced. And there it was. The truth Ethan had been circling around for weeks. Yes, the house was harder to run without Lena's organizational skills. Yes, Mason struggled with the new routine, but underneath all that practical loss was something deeper, something that had nothing to do with efficiency or convenience. He missed her laugh, rare but genuine. He missed the way she'd argued with him about whether to plant tomatoes or peppers in the garden. He missed seeing her on the porch in the evenings, reading while the sun set. He missed the feeling of coming home to a place that felt lived in, warm, like more than just a house he maintained. "I think I've been an idiot," he said finally. Maria smiled. "Welcome to the realization. Now, what are you going to do about it?" Wait. Ethan drove to Billings the following Saturday. He left early before Mason woke up, arranging for Sophia to come stay with him. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, partly because he wasn't entirely sure himself. He just knew he needed to see Lena, needed to have the conversation he should have had weeks ago. The address Maria had given him led to a modest apartment complex on the south side of the city. Ethan sat in his truck for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally climbing out and finding the right unit. He knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened, and there she was, Lena Hayes, looking tired and surprised and guarded all at once. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back the way she usually wore it. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Ethan," she said finally, and her voice was careful, controlled. "What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. I asked you not to contact me. I know, I'm sorry, but He stopped, searching for the right words. "I need to understand why you left. The real reason, not just, I'm done." Lena's expression flickered, something like pain crossing her face before she shuddered it. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." "Why? So you can feel better about yourself? So you can check the box that says you tried?" Her tone was sharper than he'd ever heard it. "I made a decision, Ethan. I moved on. You should do the same." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "Because Mason asks about you every day. Because the house doesn't feel right without you. Because I keep thinking about all the things I took for granted, and all the ways I failed to see what was right in front of me." Lena's jaw tightened. "Mason's not my responsibility anymore, and the house just needs better organization. You'll figure it out." "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He looked at her, really looked, the way Victoria had accused him of never doing. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she held the door like a barrier between them. "I meant that I miss you," he said quietly. "Not what you did, you. And I think I've been missing you for longer than I realized. I just didn't let myself see it." Something in Lena's expression cracked, just slightly. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Say things you don't mean because you feel guilty, because you're trying to fix something that's already broken." Her voice wavered. "I can't be what you need, Ethan. I can't be the person who holds your life together while you look right through me. I did that for 4 years, and it almost destroyed me." "I wasn't looking through you." "Yes, you were. Every single day." Lena's eyes were bright now, angry and hurt. "Do you know what it's like to love someone who doesn't even see you? To organize your entire existence around their life and their kid and their needs, hoping that maybe eventually they'll notice you're more than just the person who does their laundry?" The words hung in the air between them, and Ethan felt them settle into his chest like stones. "You loved me," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. Lena laughed, but it sounded broken. "Of course I loved you. I loved you and Mason and that stupid ranch and the life we could have had if you'd ever just looked at me the way you looked at the horizon every morning, like something worth paying attention to." "Lena, no. You don't get to come here and make this harder than it already is." She was crying now, angry tears that she wiped away roughly. "I left because I had to. Because staying meant accepting that I'd always be second choice, always invisible, always the woman who loved you while you loved someone who wasn't there anymore." The mention of Sarah hit him like a physical blow. "This isn't about Sarah, isn't it? You've been mourning her for 5 years, Ethan, keeping yourself locked away where nothing and no one can touch you. And I was convenient because I didn't ask for anything, didn't push, didn't demand you actually show up emotionally. I just existed in your space, making everything easier, hoping that maybe someday you'd wake up and see me. I see you now. Now doesn't matter. Now is too late. Lena started to close the door. Go home. Take care of Mason. Find someone who can be what you need without destroying herself in the process. But leave me alone. Please. I can't do that. You have to. Why? Because I'm trying to heal. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. I'm trying to rebuild myself into someone who doesn't wait around for scraps of attention from a man who'll never love me back. And every time you show up, every time you say things that sound like maybe you care, it sets me back. So please, just go. The door closed, firm and final. Ethan stood in the hallway, staring at the number on the door, feeling like he'd just lost something crucial that he'd only started to understand. He drove home slowly, Lena's words echoing in his head. The rain had started again, turning the highway into a blur of gray. Somewhere around the halfway point, he had to pull over because his vision was too blurred to drive safely. And he sat in his truck on the shoulder while rain hammered the roof, and he finally let himself feel everything he'd been avoiding for 5 years. Grief and loss and loneliness and the terrible understanding that he'd hurt someone who deserved better. When he got home, Mason was waiting on the porch, despite the rain. Did you find her? The kid asked. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. Is she coming back? No, buddy. I don't think she is. Mason's face fell, but he didn't cry. He just stood there in the rain, looking older than 7, and said, You should have told her you were sorry. I tried. Did you tell her you love her? The question stopped Ethan cold. I don't. Yeah, you do. You're just scared. Mason turned and went inside, leaving Ethan standing in the rain, confronted once again by the uncomfortable truth that his kid understood things he was still trying to figure out. That night, Ethan lay in bed and thought about Lena's words, about 4 years of her quiet presence, about all the moments he'd missed because he was too locked in his own grief and fear to see what was being offered. And for the first time since Sarah died, he let himself cry, for what he'd lost then and what he'd lost now, and the man he'd become who was too broken to hold on to something good, even when it was right there beside him. The week that followed felt like moving through water, everything slower, heavier, requiring more effort than it should. Ethan went through the motions of running the ranch, but his heart wasn't in it. Ray noticed, of course, but had the decency not to say anything beyond offering to take on extra work when Ethan's focus wavered. Mason noticed too, but handled it differently. You look sad, the kid said one morning over breakfast, watching Ethan push scrambled eggs around his plate without eating. I'm fine. You're lying. Mason took a bite of toast, chewing thoughtfully. Did Lena yell at you? No, she didn't yell. Then what happened? Ethan set down his fork, meeting his son's eyes. She told me the truth about why she left, and it wasn't pretty. What truth? That I hurt her. By not seeing her, not paying attention to what mattered. Ethan's throat felt tight. She was right there for years, and I treated her like furniture, like something that was just supposed to be there without me having to think about it. Mason considered this seriously. So you're sad because you were mean? I wasn't trying to be mean, but yeah, I guess that's what it comes down to. Are you going to fix it? I don't know if I can. She told me to leave her alone. But do you want to fix it? The question was so simple, so direct, and Ethan found himself without an easy answer. Want implied choice, intention, the kind of active decision-making he'd been avoiding. But sitting there across from his 7-year-old son, he couldn't hide behind vagueness. Yes, he said quietly. I want to fix it. I just don't know how. Mason nodded, satisfied with the honesty, if not the outcome. Maybe you have to figure out what you actually want first, before you try to fix anything. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't usually ask me stuff. The kid grinned, breaking the tension. Can I have more orange juice? Ethan poured him more juice and tried to remember when his son had stopped being a little kid and started being a person with actual insights. Probably sometime when he hadn't been paying attention, just like everything else. The morning wore on. Ethan took Mason to school, then headed out to check the irrigation system in the east fields. The work was mindless, repetitive, and normally he'd find comfort in that. But today his thoughts kept circling back to Billings, to Lena's tear-streaked face, to the raw pain in her voice when she'd said she was trying to heal. He'd done that to her, taken someone good and kind and willing, and ground her down through sheer obliviousness until she had to leave to survive. His phone rang around noon. He almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Victoria's name. "Hey," he said, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder while he worked. "Hey yourself, how are you holding up?" "I went to see Lena." There was a pause. "How'd that go?" "About as badly as possible. She told me she loved me, that I'd been looking through her for 4 years, and that she needed me to leave her alone so she could heal." The words tasted bitter. "So yeah, not great. I'm sorry." "Are you? You're the one who told me to go talk to her." "I told you to figure your stuff out. I didn't promise it would be easy or that she'd fall into your arms the second you showed up." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "What did you expect, Ethan? That you could just apologize and everything would be fine?" "I don't know what I expected." "Did you tell her how you feel?" "I told her I missed her." "That's not the same thing." Ethan stopped working, straightening up. "What do you want me to say? That I love her? I don't even know if that's true. I know I miss her. I know I was an idiot. I know I want her back in my life somehow, but love, that's scary. I know. But if you're not willing to be honest about what you're feeling, then Lena's right to keep you at a distance." Victoria sighed. "Look, I don't have a stake in this anymore. We both know that whatever was starting between us wasn't real. But I like you, and I think you deserve to be happy. And I think Lena probably deserves better than what you've given her so far. So figure out what you actually feel. Not what's convenient or practical or easy to manage. What you actually feel. And if I can't, then let her go. Really let her go. Not this halfway thing where you're too paralyzed to move in any direction. She deserves that much." They talked for a few more minutes before Victoria had to go. When Ethan hung up, he stood in the empty field with the sun beating down and forced himself to actually think about the question everyone kept asking. Did he love Lena? The practical answer was that love was complicated, that 4 years of proximity didn't automatically equal romantic feelings, that he'd been grieving and shut down and not equipped for that kind of connection. But underneath the practical answer was something messier. The way his chest had tightened when he'd walked into that empty cottage. The way Mason's mention of her name could derail his entire day. The photograph he still carried in his wallet. The hundreds of small moments he'd never categorized as important, but that had apparently been building towards something he'd refused to see. The way she'd looked at him in that Billings hallway. Hurt and angry. And still, somehow, like she cared despite everything. Like even after 4 years of being invisible, part of her was still hoping he'd finally show up. And the fact that he'd driven 2 hours to see her without really questioning why. That he'd stood outside her door feeling more terrified than he had in years. That hearing her say she'd loved him had felt like both a gift and a wound. Maybe that was love. Or maybe it was just the beginning of it, the messy, uncertain start before you had words for what you were feeling. Either way, Victoria was right. He owed Lena honesty. And he owed it to himself to stop hiding behind grief and routine and all the comfortable lies he'd been telling himself about what he wanted. That evening, he called Ray. "I need advice," Ethan said without preamble. "About Lena?" "Yeah, how do I—" He stopped, frustrated by his own inability to articulate what he needed. "How do I show someone they matter when I've spent years proving they don't?" Ray was quiet for a moment. "You know what Maria did when we first started dating, when I was being an idiot and taking her for granted?" "What?" "She made me write down every time I thought about her for a week. Every single time she crossed my mind, I had to write it down and why. And at the end of the week, I had this list that was like 3 pages long of all these tiny moments, remembering something she'd said, wondering what she was doing, wanting to tell her about my day. All these things I'd been ignoring because I was too busy, or distracted, or stupid. What's the point of that? The point is I realized how often she was in my head, how much space she took up in my life even when she wasn't physically there. And it made me understand that what I felt was real, not just convenient or habitual. It was real, and I was wasting it by not paying attention. Ethan turned the idea over in his mind. So I should make a list? I'm saying maybe start by actually examining your own thoughts instead of just reacting to things. Figure out what Lena means to you before you try to tell her. Because if you go back to her without being sure, if you're still just guessing or hoping or trying to fix your guilt, she'll see right through it, and you'll hurt her worse than you already have. I don't want to hurt her. Then be certain. That's all I'm saying. Be certain of what you feel and what you want. Then, when you're ready, you show her with actions, not just words. Because words are easy. Actions take commitment. After they hung up, Ethan sat on the porch and thought about Ray's advice. Then he went inside, grabbed a notebook from Mason's school supplies, and started writing. At first it felt ridiculous, documenting his own thoughts like some kind of emotional inventory. But once he started, it came easier than expected. Thought about Lena when I made coffee this morning. She always used to make it stronger than I do, said my version tasted like dishwater. I argued with her about it once, told her coffee wasn't supposed to be that strong. She just smiled and made it her way anyway. I realized today I actually liked it better her way. Mason asked if Lena would come to his school play next month. He didn't ask if she could come. He asked if she would. Like the difference mattered, like he knew she'd want to but might not be allowed to anymore. I didn't know what to tell him. Saw a woman at the feed store with hair the same color as Lena's. My heart did this stupid skip thing before I realized it wasn't her. Felt like an idiot for being disappointed. The list grew over the next few days. Small observations, random memories, moments when Lena's absence felt like a missing piece. By Thursday, Ethan had filled 5 pages, and the pattern was impossible to ignore. She was everywhere. In the routine she'd established, in the spaces she'd occupied, in the thoughts that drifted through his mind without permission. She'd been woven into the fabric of his daily life so thoroughly that removing her had left visible gaps. But more than that, the memories he kept returning to weren't about what she'd done for him. They were about who she'd been, the way she'd laugh at Mason's terrible jokes, the fierce concentration on her face when she was reading, the time she'd argued with him for 20 minutes about whether to rescue a stray cat and then gone and done it anyway when he'd said no, the quiet competence with which she'd moved through the world, asking for nothing but somehow making everything better just by being there. That was the thing Ray had been trying to make him see. Lena hadn't just been useful, she'd been real and specific and irreplaceable. And somewhere along the way, without him noticing, she'd become essential. On Friday, Mason came home from school with a drawing, a crayon sketch of 3 people standing in front of a house. Him, Ethan, and a brown-haired woman labeled Lena in his careful second-grade handwriting. We were supposed to draw our family, Mason explained, seeing Ethan's expression. I know she's not technically family, but she felt like it, so I drew her anyway. Ethan stared at the drawing, something cracking open in his chest. Does your teacher know who she is? I told her Lena used to live with us. She asked if Lena was my mom, and I said no, my mom died. But Lena was like, I don't know, like someone who could have been family if things were different. If things were different, Ethan repeated quietly, what would make them different? Mason looked at him seriously. If you wanted her to stay. If you'd asked her to be more than just the housekeeper. If you'd paid attention. The simplicity of it was devastating. Ethan pulled his son into a hug, holding him close, while Mason tolerated it with the patience of a kid who knew his dad needed the comfort more than he did. I'm going to try to fix this, Ethan said into Mason's hair. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm going to try. Good. Because I really miss her, and I think you do too, even if you're bad at saying it. That weekend, Ethan didn't go to Billings. Instead, he stayed home and thought about what Ray had said. That actions mattered more than words, that certainty required commitment. He thought about Lena's life before she'd come to work for him. She'd mentioned once, in passing, that she'd wanted to be a teacher but couldn't afford to finish her degree. Another time, she'd talked about growing up in Kansas, about tornado shelters and summer storms, and a childhood that sounded lonely. He realized he knew almost nothing about her. 4 years, and he'd never asked the questions that would have revealed the person underneath the role she played. That was going to change. On Monday, he drove into town and stopped at the county library. The librarian, an older woman named Patricia, who'd known his family for decades, looked surprised to see him. Ethan Cole. Don't think I've seen you in here since high school, I need to find someone, he said. Or rather, I need to learn about someone. Can you help me with that? Patricia's eyes sharpened with interest. This someone have a name? Lena Hayes. She worked for me until a few weeks ago. I need to know more about her, where she came from, what she cares about, who she is when she's not taking care of my life. That's an unusual request. I've been an unusually bad friend. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I can work with that. Give me a few days. I've got resources. 3 days later, Patricia called him back to the library. She'd assembled a small stack of papers, old newspaper clippings, college records, even a few social media profiles Lena had apparently abandoned years ago. She grew up in liberal Kansas, Patricia said, walking him through the material. Only child, father left when she was young, mother died when she was 19. She started a degree in elementary education at Kansas State, but dropped out after 2 years. Looks like financial reasons. Moved around for a while, worked various jobs, ended up in Montana about 6 years ago. Ethan read through the clippings. There was a photo from a high school newspaper, Lena at 16, grinning at the camera while holding a trophy for academic achievement. Another from a community college newsletter, listing her on the dean's list. She was smart, he said, looking at the records. Very. Could have done anything she wanted if she'd had the resources. Patricia's expression was knowing. She came into the library sometimes while she was working for you, always checking out books on child development, elementary education, teaching methods. I asked her once if she was thinking about going back to school. She said maybe someday, when she had time and money saved up. The information settled into Ethan's understanding of Lena, filling in gaps he hadn't known existed. She hadn't just been marking time at the ranch, collecting a paycheck while her life waited. She'd had dreams, plans, goals she'd quietly pursued around the edges of taking care of his family. What are you planning to do with this? Patricia asked. I don't know yet, but I needed to understand who she actually is, not just who I assumed she was. That's a start. Patricia's smile was sad, though understanding comes a lot easier when you ask the person directly instead of doing research behind their back. She won't talk to me. Did you give her a reason to? Or did you just show up asking for forgiveness without offering anything real in return? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He thanked Patricia, gathered the papers, and drove home feeling like he was finally starting to see the shape of what he'd lost and what he needed to do to earn it back. The storm rolled in on a Tuesday night, sudden and vicious the way Montana weather could be. The forecast had called for rain, but what arrived was something more. Wind that rattled the windows, lightning that turned the sky white, rain that came down in sheets so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Ethan was in the barn when it hit, checking on equipment with Ray. The lights flickered and both men looked up at the ceiling. That's not good, Ray said. No. How many head do we have in the north pasture? About 40? They should be fine as long as the creek doesn't flood. Lightning struck close enough that they both felt it, a crack of thunder that shook the building. Ethan pulled out his phone, checking the weather radar. The storm system was massive, rotating, the kind that could spawn tornadoes. We need to move those cattle, Ethan said. If that creek floods, they'll be trapped. In this? It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to leave them. Ethan was already moving, grabbing his rain gear. I'll take the ATV. You stay here. Monitor the radar. If it gets worse, call me back. Ethan, I'm not losing 40 head because I was too cautious. We've had this conversation before. Ray swore but didn't argue further. He knew better. When Ethan made a decision about the ranch, especially one involving the cattle, there was no point fighting him. Ethan suited up and headed out into the storm. The rain hit like needles, cold and sharp, and the wind threatened to knock him off balance. He climbed onto the ATV, fired it up, and headed toward the north pasture. The ride was nightmarish. Mud sucked at the tires, lightning illuminated the landscape in stark flashes, and the rain made it nearly impossible to see. But Ethan had been working this land for most of his life. He knew it in the dark, in the rain, in every season and condition. He found the cattle huddled near the tree line, nervous but not panicked yet. The creek was already rising, brown water churning with debris. Another hour and it would overflow its banks, cutting off the only exit route. Ethan spent the next 2 hours moving the herd, one small group at a time, guiding them through the storm to higher ground. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Twice the ATV nearly got stuck in mud. Once lightning struck close enough that his hair stood on end and the cattle spooked, scattering in directions he had to chase down. By the time he got the last of them to safety, he was soaked through, shaking from cold and adrenaline, and so tired he could barely think straight. The creek had already overflowed, turning the pasture into a churning mess that would have drowned or scattered the herd. He made it back to the barn after midnight. Ray was waiting, looking furious and relieved in equal measure. "You're an idiot," Ray said, helping Ethan off the ATV. "Cattle are safe." "So are you, barely. Don't ever do that again." Ethan didn't bother arguing. He was too tired. Ray drove him back to the house, but when they pulled up, there was another truck in the driveway. One Ethan recognized. Lena's truck. He stared at it, wondering if exhaustion was making him hallucinate. But no, the truck was real, and as he climbed out of Ray's vehicle, the front door of the house opened. Lena stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm interior light, her expression a mixture of worry and something else Ethan couldn't quite name. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice rough from shouting over the storm. "Sophia called me. Said Mason was scared because of the storm and you were out in it. She stopped, seeming to realize how it sounded. "I shouldn't have come, but I needed to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." "You look half drowned and about to collapse." Her voice was sharp, concerned. "Get inside before you get hypothermia on top of everything else." Ray, who'd been watching the exchange with interest, cleared his throat. "I'm going to head home. Maria's probably worried." "Ethan, you good?" "Yeah. Thanks for the help." Ray drove off, leaving Ethan standing in the rain, staring at Lena. She stepped back, gesturing him inside with a look that said she wasn't asking. The house was warm, dry, safe. Mason was asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket. Lena must have sat with him until he crashed. "You should get out of those clothes," Lena said, not looking at him. "I'll make coffee." "You don't have to. Just do it, Ethan, please." He went upstairs, peeled off the soaked layers, and changed into dry clothes. When he came back down, Lena had coffee waiting, strong, the way she used to make it. She'd also set out towels and was busying herself with cleaning up the kitchen, movements automatic and familiar. "Mason okay?" Ethan asked, sitting at the table. "He's fine. Worried about you. The storm scared him, and when he couldn't reach you, he called Sophia crying. She called me." Lena finally looked at him. "I know I said to leave me alone, but I couldn't not come. Not when he needed someone." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you." The words should have stung, but Ethan understood them for what they were. Self-protection, distance, the walls she'd built to survive leaving. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, the storm still raging outside. Eventually, Lena spoke. "Why were you out there? In weather like this?" "Cattle needed moving. Creek was flooding. You could have died. But I didn't. That's not the point." Her hands were shaking slightly around the coffee mug. "You take these stupid risks because you think the ranch is more important than you are. But it's not. And Mason needs you alive more than he needs 40 head of cattle." "I know that." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you throw yourself into danger because it's easier than dealing with anything that actually matters." The accusation hung between them, and Ethan couldn't deny it, because she was right. Going out into the storm, risking himself for the cattle, it was about duty, yes, but it was also about control. About doing something concrete and manageable instead of facing the messy, complicated feelings he'd been avoiding. "You're right," he said quietly. Lena blinked, surprised. "What?" "You're right. I do that. I have been doing that for years, hiding behind work and duty and all the practical things I can control because the stuff I can't control terrifies me." "Ethan, let me finish." He set down his coffee, meeting her eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said in Billings, about how I looked through you, about how you loved me while I loved someone who wasn't there, and you were right about all of it. I was so locked up in grief and fear that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. But I see it now. I see you now. And I'm sorry it took losing you to make that happen." Lena's expression was guarded, careful. Apologies don't fix 4 years of being invisible. "I know. But I'm not just apologizing. I'm trying to tell you." He stopped, searching for the right words. "I spent the last 2 weeks really thinking about what you mean to me, Not what you did for me, not how you made my life easier, but you, Lena Hayes, the person you are. And what did you figure out? That I've been halfway in love with you for longer than I realized. That I miss you in ways that have nothing to do with convenience or routine. That when I think about my life, the version I actually want, you're in it. Not as the housekeeper or the help or someone who takes care of things. As someone who matters. As someone I can't imagine being without. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Lena's eyes were bright, but her expression didn't soften. You can't just say that, she said, her voice shaking. You can't show up after weeks of silence and say you love me and expect it to fix everything. I don't expect it to fix anything. I just needed you to know. Why? Why now? Because I'm tired of hiding. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because if there's even a chance you might still care about me, about us, I need to fight for it instead of just letting you go. Lena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the storm was starting to ease, the rain lightening to a steady patter. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, and Ethan stayed seated, giving her space. I can't do this again, she said finally. I can't be the person who waits around hoping you'll notice me, who builds her whole life around yours and settles for scraps. I'm not asking you to settle. I'm asking for a chance to do this right. And if it doesn't work, if you wake up in 6 months and realize you were just lonely or guilty or confused, then I'll have to live with that. But I don't think that's what this is. Ethan stood, moving closer, but not touching her. I know I don't have the right to ask you to trust me, but I'm asking anyway. Give me a chance to prove that you matter, that this is real. Lena turned, and the look on her face was heartbreaking. Hope and fear and exhaustion all tangled together. I don't know if I can. Then don't decide now. Just don't leave yet. Stay until the storm passes. Let me show you I mean it. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Whatever she found must have been enough because she nodded slowly. Until the storm passes, she said. That's all I'm promising. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. They stood in the kitchen as the storm gradually lost its fury, the violence outside fading to a steady drum of rain against the windows. Lena moved first, breaking the tension by walking to the sink and rinsing out her coffee mug with movements that were too precise, too controlled. I should check on Mason, she said, not looking at Ethan. He's fine. Out cold. Still, she dried her hands on a towel, then moved to the couch where Mason was curled under the blanket. Ethan watched as she knelt beside the kid, brushing hair off his forehead with a gentleness that made something ache in his chest. Mason stirred slightly but didn't wake, and Lena stayed there for a moment, her hand resting on his shoulder. When she stood, her eyes were wet. He's gotten bigger, she said quietly. Just in a few weeks. Kids do that. I know. She stopped, shaking her head. I missed so much already. 4 years of watching him grow up, and I missed the last few weeks because I was too hurt to stay. You didn't miss anything. You were protecting yourself. Maybe, but it still feels like losing something. Lena wrapped her arms around herself again, that defensive posture Ethan was starting to recognize. This is why I can't just come back, Ethan. It's not about you, not entirely. It's about me and what I need. I can't keep building my life around other people and hoping they'll eventually see me. I need to matter on my own terms. You do matter. To Mason, maybe. But what about to you? Really? She finally looked at him, and her expression was raw. If I hadn't left, would you have ever noticed me? Or would I have just kept existing in the background until I was old and bitter and had nothing left of myself? The question deserved honesty, not comfort. Ethan thought about it seriously before answering. I don't know, he admitted. I want to say yes, that eventually I would have pulled my head out and seen what was right there. But honestly, I might not have. I was good at being numb, good at keeping everything at a distance. You leaving? It forced me to look at things I'd been avoiding. So no, I can't promise I would have figured it out on my own. Lena nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. At least you're honest. I'm trying to be. About everything. Ethan moved closer, careful not to crowd her. But here's what I can tell you. I see you now. Really see you. And I know what I want, and it's not about filling a gap or easing my guilt or any of the other bullshit reasons people convince themselves they care about someone. I want you in my life because you make it better. Because you're funny and smart, and you don't take my crap. Because Mason lights up when you're around. Because coming home to you felt right in a way I didn't let myself acknowledge. Felt. Past tense. Feels. Present tense. Even now, with you standing there, looking like you want to run, it still feels right. Lena's jaw tightened. Don't do this to me, Ethan. Don't say exactly what I wanted to hear for 4 years and expect me to just fold. I'm not expecting anything. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth. She laughed, but it was broken. You know what the truth is? I stayed for 4 years hoping you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now. And I hated myself for it. For being so pathetic that I'd accept nothing just to be near you. And when I finally left, when I finally chose myself, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because I still loved you. I still wanted this. But I knew if I stayed, if I kept waiting, I'd disappear completely. You didn't disappear. You're the realest person I know. To you, maybe. Now. But for years, I was barely a person to you at all. She wiped at her eyes angrily. And the worst part is, I can see that you mean it now. I can see that something changed. But I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know if I can trust you not to wake up one day and realize this was just a phase, just your grief or loneliness talking. Ethan wanted to argue, to promise her that wouldn't happen. But he'd learned enough in the past few weeks to know that promises weren't what she needed. Then let me prove it, he said simply. However long it takes, however much distance you need, let me show you that this is real. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. He paused. And if you decide you can't do this, if you need to walk away for good, I'll accept that. But at least give me the chance to try. Lena stared at him, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. Hope fighting with self-preservation, want battling with fear. Finally, she looked away. I need time, she said. I need to think. Okay? And I need you to understand that I'm not going to just slot back into your life like nothing happened. If we do this, if it has to be different, real, not me taking care of everything while you go through the motions. I understand. Do you? Because it's easy to say that now, when you're scared of losing me. But what about in 6 months, when things are comfortable again? When the fear fades and old patterns start creeping back? Then you call me on it. You tell me when I'm being an idiot. You don't let me get away with taking you for granted. Ethan moved closer. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. I'm not perfect, Lena. I'm going to screw up. But I won't go back to not seeing you. That I can promise. She searched his face, and whatever she found there made her shoulders drop slightly, some of the tension easing. The storm's letting up, she said, glancing toward the window. I should probably go. Stay. The word came out more desperate than he'd intended. Please, just until morning. Mason will want to see you when he wakes up. Ethan, I'm not trying to manipulate you, He stopped, frustrated with his own inability to articulate what he was feeling. I don't want you to leave yet. Not like this. Stay in the cottage if you don't want to be in the house. But stay. Lena looked at Mason, still sleeping on the couch, then back at Ethan. Her resistance was crumbling, he could see it, and he felt guilty for using the kid as leverage even as he knew it was the truth. Mason would want to see her. Fine, she said finally, but I'm sleeping in the cottage and tomorrow I'm going back to Billings. This doesn't mean anything changed. Okay. She grabbed her coat and Ethan walked her to the door. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The worst of the storm passed. Lena paused on the threshold. Why now? She asked quietly. Why did it take me leaving for you to figure this out? I don't know. Maybe I needed to lose you to understand what I had. Maybe I'm just slow. He met her eyes. But I'm not letting fear run my life anymore. Not about this. Lena nodded, then stepped out into the night. Ethan watched her walk to the cottage, watched the lights come on through the windows, and felt something settle in his chest that might have been hope or might have been terror. Probably both. He went back inside, checked on Mason, then sat in the quiet kitchen and tried to figure out his next move. Because Lena was right, words weren't enough. He needed to show her, with actions, that he meant everything he'd said. The question was how, what? Morning came gray and damp, the landscape muddy and beaten from the storm. Ethan woke early, made coffee, and was halfway through checking the storm damage on his phone when Mason appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is Lena still here?" the kid asked immediately. "She's in the cottage. She stayed because of the storm." Mason's face lit up. "Can I go see her?" "Let her sleep a bit longer. You can see her at breakfast." But Lena appeared before breakfast was ready, knocking on the door looking tired but composed. Mason launched himself at her before Ethan could say anything, and Lena caught him with a laugh that sounded surprised and genuine. "Hey, kiddo," she said, hugging him back. "You okay? Sophia said you were scared last night." The thunder was really loud, and Dad was gone for forever. Mason pulled back, looking up at her. "Are you coming back? To stay?" The question hung in the air. Lena glanced at Ethan, who kept his expression neutral, then back at Mason. "I'm just visiting for now," she said carefully. "But I'm glad you're okay." "That's not a real answer." "Mason," Ethan warned gently. "It's okay," Lena said. She knelt down to Mason's level. "The truth is, I don't know yet. Your dad and I are figuring some things out. But no matter what happens, I still care about you. That doesn't change." Mason considered this with the seriousness of a kid who'd learned early that life didn't always give you the answers you wanted. "Okay, but I want you to stay." "I know, buddy, I know." They had breakfast together, the three of them around the kitchen table, and it felt both familiar and strange. Lena had always eaten with them before, but there'd been an invisible line. She was the employee. They were the family. Now that line was blurred, and Ethan could feel all of them navigating the uncertainty. After breakfast, Mason went to play outside, leaving Ethan and Lena alone with the dirty dishes. "I should head out soon," Lena said, rinsing plates. "Get back to Billings." "Can I ask you something first?" She looked at him warily. "I guess." "What would it take for you to consider coming back, or at least trying to figure this out together, instead of at a distance?" Lena set down the plate she was holding, staring at the soapy water. "I don't know. Proof, I guess, that this isn't just you feeling guilty or scared of being alone, that you actually want me, specifically, not just someone to fill the gap Sarah left. This has nothing to do with Sarah, doesn't it? You spent 5 years mourning her, Ethan. 5 years shutting everyone out. And now suddenly you're ready to move on? It's hard to believe the timing is coincidental." The mention of his dead wife felt like a cold slap, but Ethan forced himself not to react defensively. "Sarah was my wife. I loved her. And yeah, losing her broke something in me that I didn't know how to fix. But what I feel for you, it's not about replacing her or filling a void, it's about you. How can you be sure? Because when I think about Sarah, I remember the past. Good memories, painful ones, a life we had that's over. But when I think about you, I think about the future, about possibilities, about a life I actually want to live, not just endure." Lena's hands were still in the sink, but she'd stopped moving. "That's a nice thing to say." "It's the truth." "Maybe." She pulled her hands out, drying them on a towel. "But I still need time and space. I can't make decisions about my life while I'm here, with Mason looking at me like I'm going to break his heart, and you saying all the right things. I need to go back to Billings, think about what I actually want without the pressure of you both needing me." It wasn't the answer Ethan wanted, but he understood it. "Okay, but can I ask one more thing?" "What?" "Can I call you, not to pressure you, just to talk? Let you see that I'm serious about this." Lena hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You can call, but I'm not promising anything." "I know." She left an hour later, hugging Mason goodbye and avoiding Ethan's eyes when she walked to her truck. He stood on the porch and watched her drive away, feeling like he'd just been given both a gift and a sentence. Permission to try, but no guarantee it would work. Mason appeared beside him, slipping his small hand into Ethan's larger one. "She's sad," the kid observed. "Yeah." "Are you going to fix it?" "I'm going to try." "Good, because she belongs here." Mason looked up at him. "You know that, right?" Ethan squeezed his son's hand. "I'm starting to." The next few days settled into a strange new routine. Ethan called Lena every evening, short conversations that started awkward and gradually became easier. They talked about small things mostly, how her job search in Billings was going, what Mason was up to, the weather. But underneath the mundane topics was something else, a tentative rebuilding of connection. On the fourth night, their conversation drifted into deeper territory. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said, her voice thoughtful over the phone. "Sure." "What was Sarah like? Really like? I mean, not the memory you keep locked away, but the actual person." The question surprised him. "Why do you want to know?" "Because she's part of your story, part of what shaped you. And if we're going to figure this out, if I need to understand all of you, not just the parts you're comfortable showing." Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking about his dead wife for the first time in months without it feeling like stepping on glass. She was fierce, stubborn as hell. We fought constantly about stupid things, whether to paint the kitchen blue or green, what to name the dog, how to organize the barn. But underneath all that fighting was love. Real, solid love. "You must miss her." "I do. But it's different now, less sharp, more like..." He searched for the right words. "Like remembering a dream. Beautiful, important, but not quite real anymore. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Were you happy before she died?" "Most of the time. We had our problems, like everyone. She wanted to travel more. I was married to the ranch. She was social. I was a hermit. But we made it work." He paused. "The thing is, I don't think I appreciated it enough while I had it. I was always thinking about the next season, the next problem to solve. And then she was gone, and I realized I'd wasted so much time not being present. Is that why you shut down after? To avoid making the same mistake? Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't know how to be open anymore. The pain was so big, and the only way to function was to lock it away. But locking away pain means locking away everything else too. Joy, connection, hope. All of it got sealed off." His voice dropped. "Until you left. And then suddenly I couldn't stay numb anymore. I didn't leave to shake you up. I know. You left to save yourself, but it shook me up anyway." Ethan shifted the phone to his other ear. "Thank you for asking about her. Sarah, I mean. Most people avoid the topic, like mentioning her will break me. Everyone's got history. Pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it go away." Lena sounded tired. "I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow." "Yeah, good night, Lena." "Night." After she hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet house and thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. He was thinking about the future now, making plans that included someone else. It felt risky and uncomfortable, and also right in a way he couldn't quite explain. The following Saturday, Victoria called. "How's it going?" she asked. "Slow, but maybe moving in the right direction." "Good, I'm glad." She sounded genuine. "I'm heading back to Seattle next week. Wanted to say goodbye before I left." "You don't have to." "I want to. Have coffee with me, one last time." They met at the same diner, sliding into the same booth they'd sat in weeks earlier. Victoria looked polished as always, but there was something different in her expression, acceptance maybe, or relief. "You look better," she said. "Less haunted." "I feel better. Still terrified, but better." "Terrified of what?" "Screwing this up. Hurting her worse than I already have. Discovering I'm not actually capable of being what she needs." Victoria smiled. "That's called being in love. The terror means you care." "Is it always this hard?" "The real stuff?" "Yeah. The easy relationships are the ones that don't matter much. When you actually care about someone, when losing them would genuinely hurt, it's supposed to be scary." She took a sip of her coffee. "For what it's worth, I think you'll figure it out. You're stubborn enough." "Thanks. I think. I mean it. You're not perfect, Ethan. You're closed off and you avoid feelings and you're probably going to keep making mistakes. But you're also honest and loyal and you're trying. That counts for something. You're being awfully generous to a guy who basically used you as a distraction. You didn't use me. We used each other in a way. I needed to prove I could still put myself out there after my last disaster. You needed to convince yourself you were capable of moving on. We both got something out of it." Victoria's expression softened. "And honestly, meeting you reminded me what I'm actually looking for. Someone who sees me, who's present, who doesn't just appreciate what I can do for them. So thank you for that." "You'll find it. Someone better than me." Definitely better than you, she agreed, grinning. But you're not terrible, and I think Lena's lucky if she can get past the hurt. They talked for another hour, easier than before, and when Victoria left, she hugged him and wished him luck. Ethan watched her drive away and felt grateful that some endings could be kind. That evening, when he called Lena, he told her about the conversation. She sounds like a good person, Lena said. She is. She also said you're lucky to have me, which I think is objectively wrong, but I appreciated the sentiment. Lena laughed, and the sound made Ethan's chest feel warm. Maybe we're both lucky. Or both idiots. Hard to say. Can I see you? The question came out before he could second guess it. Not at your sister's place. Somewhere neutral, just to talk face to face. There was a long pause. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, one conversation. If after that you still need space, I'll respect it. But I've been thinking about some things, and I want to say them in person. Another pause. Okay, but somewhere public, and just talking. Deal. They agreed to meet the following Sunday at a park halfway between the ranch and Billings. Ethan spent the week preparing, thinking about what he wanted to say, how to show her he was serious without overwhelming her. On Saturday night, Mason noticed him pacing. You're nervous, the kid observed. Little bit. About seeing Lena? Yeah. Mason set down the book he'd been reading. Are you going to tell her you love her? I already did. Kind of. Then what are you nervous about? Good question. Ethan sat down next to his son. I guess I'm nervous she won't believe me, or that she'll decide I'm not worth the risk. But you are worth it. How do you know? Because you're my dad, and you're trying to be better. That's what matters. Mason's expression turned serious. Mom used to say that people mess up. It's what they do after that counts. So if you messed up with Lena, and now you're trying to fix it, that counts. Ethan pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed by how wise and kind this kid had turned out, despite having a father who'd been half absent for years. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You're just finally noticing. The next day, Ethan drove to the park with his stomach in knots. He arrived early, parking in the lot and watching families and couples and kids playing on the grass. The normalcy of it felt surreal against the weight of what he was about to do. Lena's truck pulled in 10 minutes later. She got out slowly, and Ethan met her halfway across the parking lot. She looked nervous, too, her hands shoved in her jacket pockets, her hair pulled back in that familiar ponytail. Hi, she said. Hi, thanks for coming. I almost didn't. But you did. Yeah. She glanced around. Want to walk? They fell into step on one of the trails, moving slowly, neither quite looking at the other. For a few minutes, they just walked in silence, and Ethan tried to gather his thoughts. I've been doing some research, he said finally. Lena glanced at him, confused. Research? About you. I went to the library, talked to Patricia, found out about Kansas, about your mom, about the degree you didn't finish. He saw her expression close off and hurried to continue. I know that probably sounds creepy, but I realized I knew almost nothing about your life before you came to work for me. And if I'm serious about this, about us, I need to know you, really know you, not just assume. You could have asked me directly. You wouldn't have talked to me. So I did what I could. He stopped walking, turning to face her. You wanted to be a teacher. Lena's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. It doesn't have to be. You could finish the degree. I could help. I don't need your help, she interrupted, her voice sharp. I don't need you to fix my life or make up for lost time by throwing money at my problems. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? You feel guilty, so you want to solve everything, make it all better. But my life isn't a problem that needs solving, Ethan, and I'm not a project. He took a step back, stung. You're right. I'm sorry. I wanted to show you I was paying attention, that I cared about what matters to you. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, looking out at the park. I appreciate that, I do. But this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're trying too hard, saying all the right things, and it feels performative. Like you're following a script for how to win someone back. I'm not performing, I'm just trying to show you I'm serious. By researching my past without asking, by offering to bankroll my dreams. That's not what I need from you. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were bright with frustration. I need you to just be real with me, flawed and honest and present. Not this perfect version trying to make up for years of being absent. I don't know how to do that. Be imperfect on purpose. You don't do it on purpose. You just stop trying to control everything. Lena's voice softened slightly. Tell me something true, something you're afraid to say. Ethan felt his defenses rise, the familiar urge to deflect, but he forced himself to push through it. I'm terrified, he said quietly, that even if you give me another chance, I'll screw it up, that I'm fundamentally broken in ways that'll hurt you worse down the line, that I don't actually know how to be in a relationship anymore, how to let someone in, how to be vulnerable without it destroying me. He met her eyes. And I'm terrified that you'll figure all that out and decide I'm not worth the trouble. Lena's expression shifted, some of the guardedness fading. That's real. Yeah, it is. Thank you. She started walking again, and Ethan fell into step beside her. I'm scared too, that I'll go back and nothing will actually change, that I'll fall into the same patterns, waiting and hoping while you drift away, that loving you will destroy the parts of myself I've been trying to rebuild. What do we do with that? All the fear? I don't know. Maybe we just acknowledge it instead of pretending everything's fine. Lena kicked at a small rock on the path. Look, I don't have answers, Ethan. I don't know if we can make this work, or if we're both just holding on to something that should stay broken. But I know I can't keep having these conversations at a distance. If we're going to try, and I'm not saying we are, it has to be real, which means messy and imperfect, and probably painful sometimes. I can do messy and imperfect. Can you? Because for 5 years you've been the opposite, controlled and shut down and allergic to anything resembling chaos. Then I'll learn, with you. He stopped walking again, and this time he reached for her hand. She let him take it, and the contact felt electric. I can't promise I won't mess up. I probably will, repeatedly. But I can promise I'll keep trying. That I'll show up, even when it's hard. That I won't take you for granted again. Lena looked down at their joined hands, and Ethan could see her wavering, the walls crumbling piece by piece. I missed you, she said finally, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. Even though I was so angry, even though leaving was the right choice, I missed you and Mason every single day. We missed you too. The house doesn't work without you. It's not about the house working, Ethan. It's about... She stopped, frustrated. It's about mattering, about being seen, about knowing that if I walked away tomorrow, you'd miss me, not just what I did for you. I would. I do. He squeezed her hand gently. You're not invisible to me anymore, and I know that doesn't erase 4 years of you feeling like you were. But it's the truth now. They stood there on the path, holding hands, while people walked past and the world continued around them. Finally, Lena spoke. I need more time, but not at a distance. I think... She took a breath. I think I need to come back to the ranch, not to the cottage, not as the housekeeper, just as someone trying to figure this out with you. Is that crazy? No, it's not crazy. I could stay in town, visit on weekends, see how it feels without the pressure of living there. Whatever you need, however you want to do this. Lena nodded slowly, and Ethan saw the exact moment she made her decision. Something in her posture shifted, a surrender to possibility. Okay, she said, we'll try, but slowly. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But at least we'll know. She smiled, small and tentative, and Ethan felt hope bloom in his chest like spring after a long winter. They walked back to the parking lot, still holding hands, and when they reached her truck, Lena turned to him. Thank you, she said, for not giving up, for actually trying. Thank you for giving me the chance. She left with a promise to call him that evening, and Ethan drove home feeling lighter than he had in years. When he walked into the house, Mason was waiting. How'd it go? Good. Really good. She's going to come visit next weekend, try to figure things out. Mason whooped, pumping his fist in the air. I knew you could do it. We haven't done anything yet. We're just trying. That's the hard part. The rest is easy. Ethan laughed, pulling his son into a hug. I hope you're right, buddy. I really hope you're right. That week moved slower than any Ethan could remember, each day stretching out as he waited for the weekend and Lena's promised visit. He threw himself into ranch work to keep busy, but his mind kept drifting to their conversation in the park, to the feeling of her hand in his, to the cautious hope in her eyes when she'd agreed to try. Mason noticed the difference immediately. "You're humming," the kid said Thursday morning over breakfast. Ethan stopped mid-motion, spatula in hand. "I am not." "You totally are. You were humming while you made eggs." Mason grinned. "You're happy." I don't know, less heavy, I guess." "Because Lena's coming back." "She's visiting, not coming back. There's a difference." "Not really." Mason stabbed at his pancakes with the confidence of someone who saw things more clearly than the adults around him. "She's going to stay. I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because she wants to, and you want her to. And sometimes wanting the same thing is enough." Ethan wished he had his son's certainty, but doubt still crept in during the quiet moments, late at night when he couldn't sleep, or in the middle of checking cattle when his mind wandered. What if Lena realized she'd been right the first time? That he was too broken, too closed off? What if he screwed this up the way he'd screwed up everything else that mattered? Friday afternoon, Ray found him replacing boards in the barn, working with more intensity than the job required. "You're going to break something," Ray observed, leaning against a post. "Just fixing what needs fixing." "Yeah, I can see that. You planning to rebuild the entire barn by tomorrow, or is this just nervous energy?" Ethan set down the hammer, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She's coming tomorrow. Lena." "I heard. Maria's been planning it like it's a state visit." Ray's expression turned serious. "How you feeling about it?" "Terrified, hopeful, like I'm standing at the edge of something and I don't know if I'm about to fly or fall." "That's love for you. Never gets less scary. You just get better at jumping." "What if I'm not better at jumping? What if I freeze up or say the wrong thing? Or then you apologize and try again." Ray moved closer, his voice firm. "Look, you've spent weeks doing the hard work, facing your feelings, being honest, showing up. Don't sabotage yourself now by overthinking it. Just be present tomorrow. Be real. That's all she needs." Ethan wanted to believe him. He finished the repairs, checked in with the crew about weekend tasks, and went home to a house that felt too quiet and too full of possibility at the same time. That night he called Lena. "Hey," she answered, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Getting nervous? Is it that obvious? You called at 8:30 instead of 9. Your routine's off." There was rustling on her end like she was settling into bed. "I'm nervous too, if it helps." "It does, actually." Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, phone pressed to his ear. "What are you nervous about?" "That I built this up too much in my head. That the reality won't match the hope. That I'll walk in and realize nothing actually changed except the words we're saying to each other." "Things have changed. I've changed." "Have you? Or have you just become more aware?" Her voice was gentle, not accusing. "I guess that's what I'm nervous about. Whether awareness translates to actual difference, or if we're both just going to fall back into old patterns because they're comfortable. I won't let that happen." "You can't promise that. Nobody can. We're all creatures of habit," she sighed. "But I want to believe it. I want to believe we can build something new instead of just repainting the old thing." "Then let's believe it together. And if we start slipping, we call each other on it." "Deal." There was a pause. "Mason still up?" "Asleep an hour ago. He's excited to see you." "I'm excited to see him too. I miss that kid so much." Her voice went softer. "I missed both of you. Even when I was angry, even when I was trying to move on, I missed this. The conversations, the connection, the feeling of belonging somewhere." "You do belong here. You always did. I was just too stupid to see it." "Not stupid, just scared. There's a difference." They talked for another half hour, until Lena's yawns became too frequent to ignore. After they hung up, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment, the grief, the numbness, the years of going through motions without really living. And then Lena leaving, shattering his carefully constructed walls, forcing him to feel again. It had been painful. It was still painful, but maybe pain was just the price of caring about something real. He fell asleep thinking about her smile, about the possibility of tomorrow, about the fragile hope that maybe, Just maybe he could get this right. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and the kind of crisp spring air that promised summer wasn't far off. Mason was up before dawn, too excited to sleep, and by the time Lena's truck pulled into the driveway at 10, the kid was practically vibrating with anticipation. "She's here!" Mason shouted, already running for the door. Ethan followed more slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the window, he watched Lena climb out of her truck, watched Mason barrel into her with enough force to make her stumble. She caught him, laughing, and the sound carried through the open door like music. By the time Ethan reached the porch, Lena had Mason in a tight hug, the kid's arms wrapped around her waist like he'd never let go. "Missed you," Mason mumbled into her jacket. "Missed you too, kiddo. So much." She looked up and met Ethan's eyes over Mason's head, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, understanding, the weight of everything unspoken. "Hey," Ethan said, suddenly unsure how to greet her. A hug seemed too intimate, a handshake too formal. Lena solved the problem by releasing Mason and stepping forward, pulling Ethan into a brief hug that felt both natural and electric. She smelled like lavender and something else he couldn't name, just fundamentally Lena. "Hey yourself," she said, stepping back. "The place looks good." "Been keeping it together, mostly." Ethan gestured toward the house. "You want coffee? Breakfast? Mason's been planning your entire visit like a military campaign." "I made a list," Mason confirmed proudly, "of things we should do. It has 17 items. Lena laughed. 17? That's ambitious for one day. "I know, but I wanted options, in case some things didn't work out." They went inside and Ethan watched as Lena moved through the house with the ease of someone who knew every corner, every quirk. She touched the kitchen counter absently, smiled at the new dish towels he'd bought because he couldn't find the ones she'd used, noticed the photograph of her and Mason that he'd framed and put on the mantel. She stopped in front of it, her expression unreadable. "You kept this." "It's a good picture, and Mason wanted it where he could see it." "Just Mason?" "Me too," Ethan admitted. "It reminded me of what I'd lost, what I'd been too blind to appreciate." Lena touched the frame gently, then turned back to him. "So what's on this list of Masons?" The day unfolded with surprising ease. They checked on the horses, with Lena reacquainting herself with the mare she'd always favored. They walked the property, Mason pointing out every change since she'd left. The new fence post, the repaired barn door, the garden plot Ethan had started preparing, even though he had no idea what to plant. "You hate gardening," Lena said, studying the freshly turned earth. "I know, but you always wanted one, and I thought maybe, if you came back, we could figure it out together." She looked at him, surprised. "You started a garden you hate because you hoped I'd come back?" "Yeah. Is that weird?" "It's kind of sweet, actually." She knelt, running her fingers through the dark soil. "We could do tomatoes and peppers, maybe some herbs. Whatever you want." "What do you want, Ethan?" She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "That's the question you keep avoiding. You're so focused on what I want, what Mason wants. But what about you?" He thought about it seriously. "I want you here, not just for the garden or to help with the house or because Mason loves you. I want you here because it feels right. Because coming home to you feels like actually coming home, not just returning to a place I maintain." "That's better." Lena's smile was soft, more honest. They continued walking, Mason running ahead to check on something in the creek. Alone for a moment, Lena spoke quietly. "I talked to my sister about maybe moving back to Montana permanently." Ethan's heart skipped. "Yeah? What'd she say?" "That I should do what makes me happy, and that hiding in Billings wasn't the same as healing." Lena kicked at a rock. "She also said I was an idiot if I didn't give this a real chance." Her words, not mine. Smart woman. She has her moments. Lena stopped walking, turning to face him. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it." "Okay." "If I do this, if I come back, if we try to build something real, I need it to be a partnership. Not you taking care of me, not me taking care of you and Mason. An actual partnership where we both show up, both contribute, both get to be whole people with our own dreams and needs." "I want that too." "Do you? Because partnership is messy. It means fighting sometimes, disagreeing, having to compromise. It means you don't get to just retreat into work when things get hard. And it means I don't get to disappear into service and call it love. I know. And yeah, it scares me. But I'd rather be scared with you than numb without you. Lena searched his face, and whatever she found there made her shoulders drop, tension releasing. Okay, then let's try. Really try. Not just go through the motions. Really try, Ethan echoed, and it felt like a vow. Mason reappeared then, soaking wet from apparently falling into the creek, and the serious moment dissolved into laughter and the practical business of getting him dried off. But something had shifted, some final wall coming down. That evening, after dinner, which they cooked together, with Mason as an enthusiastic if messy assistant, they sat on the porch watching the sun set. Mason had finally crashed, exhausted from his 17-item list, and Ethan and Lena found themselves alone in the gathering dusk. I've been thinking about going back to school, Lena said suddenly, finishing my degree. It would take time and money, and I'd probably have to do it online while working, but I think I need to do it. For me, not because you suggested it or because I'm trying to prove something, just because it's what I always wanted. I think that's great. And I meant what I said. I'll help however I can. Not to fix you or solve your problems, but because that's what partners do. Partners, Lena repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. Yeah? Yeah. She looked at him, and in the fading light her eyes were warm. So if we're partners, there's something we should probably address. What's that? The fact that we've been dancing around this for weeks without actually defining what we are. Are we dating, courting, figuring things out? What do we call this? Ethan smiled. What do you want to call it? I asked first. Fine. I think we're two people who care about each other, trying to build something real, despite being terrified and imperfect and carrying too much baggage. I think we're taking it slow because we both got hurt, and we're being careful. And I think, eventually, if we do this right, we're going to be something that doesn't need a label, because it'll just be us. Lena was quiet for a moment. That was surprisingly poetic. I've been practicing. She laughed, and then before he could think too hard about it, she leaned over and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, tasting like the wine they'd had with dinner and something sweeter underneath. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. I've wanted to do that for about 4 years, she admitted. You should have. You wouldn't have known what to do with it. Probably not. But I know now. Ethan reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. Say the wrong thing, retreat when I should stay present, forget to check in. I'm not perfect. I don't want perfect. I just want real. She squeezed his hand. And I'm going to mess up too. Get in my head, overthink things, probably have moments where I freak out and convince myself this won't work. So we'll both mess up, together. Sounds like a plan. They sat there as the sky darkened, stars beginning to emerge overhead. After a while, Lena spoke again. I'm going to go back to Billings tomorrow, pack up my stuff, give my sister notice. It'll take maybe 2 weeks to get everything sorted. And then I'm coming back, not to the cottage. That phase is over. I'll get a place in town, something that's mine, but I'll be here most days, with you and Mason, building whatever this turns into. That works, as long as you're here. I'll be here. She rested her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. We're really doing this, aren't we? Looks like it. Terrifying. Absolutely. But there was joy in her voice underneath the fear, and Ethan felt it mirrored in his own chest, the scary, exhilarating possibility of choosing something real over something safe. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. Lena wrapped up her affairs in Billings, while Ethan worked on clearing out a room in the house that could be hers when she stayed over. Not a permanent room. She'd been clear about wanting her own space in town. But somewhere she could keep clothes, books, the small pieces of herself that would make the ranch feel like home. Mason helped, offering opinions on paint colors and furniture arrangement with the seriousness of a professional decorator. The kid was happier than Ethan had seen him in years, singing while he did homework, talking nonstop about all the things they'd do when Lena came back. Do you think she'll stay forever this time? Mason asked one evening. I don't know about forever, but I think she'll stay as long as it feels right for both of us. That's not a real answer. It's the only honest one I've got, buddy. Relationships don't come with guarantees. Mason considered this. But you love her, right? The question stopped Ethan cold. He hadn't said the words out loud yet, not even to himself, but sitting there with his son, looking at him expectantly, he couldn't dodge it. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. I love her. Did you tell her? Not yet. Why not? Because saying it makes it real, and real things can hurt you. But they can also make you happy. Like really happy, not just okay. Mason's expression was wise beyond his years. I think you should tell her, before she comes back, so she knows. Maybe. We'll see. But the conversation stuck with him. That night, he called Lena, and after they'd talked through the logistics of her move, he found himself circling around what he actually wanted to say. What's on your mind? Lena asked. You sound weird. Mason asked if I love you. There was a pause. What did you tell him? The truth. That I do. Another pause, longer this time. When Lena spoke, her voice was careful. And do you? Actually love me, not just the idea of me or the comfort of having me around. I love you. The words came easier the second time. I love that you call me on my bullshit. I love that you're fierce about the things you care about. I love that you made my kid feel safe when I was too shut down to do it properly. I love the way you look at the world like it's full of possibilities, even after everything you've been through. I love you, Lena. Specifically, completely. In a way that terrifies me and also makes me want to be better. She was crying. He could hear it in her breathing. You can't just say things like that over the phone. Why not? Because I can't kiss you through the phone, you idiot. Ethan laughed, the sound surprised out of him. So come home, come back and let me say it in person. I will. 2 days. I'll be there in 2 days. I'll be waiting. True to her word, Lena arrived on a Wednesday afternoon with her truck packed full and a smile that made Ethan's chest ache. Mason helped unload, chattering the entire time about everything they'd prepared. Ethan watched them together, seeing the easy affection between them, the way Mason had bloomed in just the anticipation of her return. That evening, after they'd gotten most of her things settled and Mason had reluctantly gone to bed, Ethan and Lena found themselves back on the porch, the place where so many of their important conversations had happened. So, Lena said, settling into the chair beside him, you told Mason you love me. I did. Are you going to tell me in person, or were you planning to leave it at the phone confession? Ethan turned to face her, taking in the familiar lines of her face, the way the porch light caught in her hair. I love you, Lena Hayes. I love you in ways I didn't know I was capable of anymore. And I know we're taking this slow. I know we're being careful. But I need you to know that this is real for me. You're real for me. Not a replacement, not a consolation prize. You're the person I choose every day for as long as you'll have me. Lena's eyes were bright. That was pretty good. I've been rehearsing. I could tell. She stood, moving to stand in front of him, her hands coming up to frame his face. I love you too, and it scares me and excites me and feels like jumping off a cliff, but I'm jumping. We're jumping together. She kissed him then, deeper than before, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other under the Montana sky, and it felt like coming home in a way that had nothing to do with place and everything to do with person. When they finally broke apart, Lena rested her forehead against his. So what now? She asked. Now we figure it out as we go. We build something new. We mess up and forgive each other and keep trying. Sounds complicated. Probably will be. Good. I don't trust things that are too easy. She smiled, pulling back to look at him. But I trust this. I trust us. Yeah? Yeah. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. They had their first real fight about a month in. Something stupid about whether to fix the fence in the west pasture now or wait until fall. Lena thought now, Ethan thought fall, and the disagreement escalated until they were both frustrated and talking past each other. But then Lena had stopped, taken a breath, and said, We're not actually fighting about the fence, are we? And Ethan had realized she was right. They were testing boundaries, seeing if they could disagree without falling apart. Once they both acknowledged that, the fight deflated, and they'd worked out a compromise that satisfied them both. There were other adjustments, too. Lena enrolled in online classes to finish her degree, which meant some evenings she was buried in coursework, and Ethan had to handle dinner and Mason's homework alone. It was harder than when she'd just managed everything, but it felt right, like they were actually building a life together instead of her supporting his. Mason thrived. His grades improved, he made new friends, and the shadow that had followed him since losing his mother seemed to finally lift. He still had hard days, moments when grief caught him unexpected. But now he had two adults who showed up for him, who didn't hide from feelings, who modeled what it looked like to love someone imperfectly, but honestly. 6 months in, Lena brought up the cottage. "What are we doing with it?" she asked one Saturday morning. "It's just sitting there empty. I thought maybe we could convert it, make it into something else." "Like what?" Ethan had been thinking about this for weeks. "Like a teaching space. Somewhere you could tutor kids once you finish your degree, give you a place that's yours, connected to the ranch but separate." Lena stared at him. "You'd do that?" "Of course. It's your dream, right, to teach?" "Yeah, but I thought I'd have to wait until I could afford classroom space, or—" "You don't have to wait. We can do this together. Partners, remember?" She kissed him hard, and when she pulled back, she was smiling so wide it transformed her entire face. "Okay, let's do it. Let's build something." They spent the next few months renovating the cottage, knocking down walls, putting in big windows, creating a warm, welcoming space that felt nothing like the lonely room Lena had occupied for years. Mason helped paint, choosing bright colors that made the space feel alive. Ray and Maria pitched in, turning it into a community project that brought everyone together. The day they finished, Lena stood in the center of the renovated space and cried. "It's perfect," she said. "It's exactly what I pictured." "You did most of the work," Ethan pointed out. "We did it together. That's what makes it perfect." That night, lying in bed, they'd quietly transitioned to sharing a room about 4 months in, a natural progression neither of them had made a big deal about. Lena turned to him. "I'm happy," she said simply. "Really, genuinely happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way." "Me either." Ethan pulled her closer. "I spent so long just surviving, I forgot what living actually felt like. And now? Now I'm living. With you. Building something that matters." Spring turned to summer, then fall. Lena graduated with her degree, and they threw a party that filled the house with friends and laughter and joy. She started tutoring, and within weeks had a wait list of kids whose parents had heard about the patient, dedicated teacher working out of a ranch in the valley. On a cool October evening, almost a year after Lena had first left, Ethan found himself back on the porch with her, watching the sun set over land that suddenly felt less like duty and more like home. "Mason asked me something today," Lena said. "What?" "He asked when we're getting married." Ethan's heart kicked. "And what did you tell him?" "I said we hadn't talked about it, which is true." She looked at him. "Have you thought about it?" "Every day for the past 3 months. And I was waiting for the right moment, but maybe there isn't a right moment. Maybe there's just now." He turned to face her fully. "I don't have a ring. I didn't plan a big romantic gesture, but I know what I want, and it's you. It's this life we've built. It's waking up next to you and fighting about fences and watching you teach kids who light up when they finally understand something. It's all of it, messy and imperfect and real. So yeah, I want to marry you, Lena Hayes, if you'll have me." She was crying and laughing at the same time. That was even better than the "I love you" speech. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes, you idiot. Of course it's a yes." He kissed her, and somewhere inside the house, Mason must have been watching through the window because they heard a whoop of victory that made them both laugh. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony on the ranch, with Mason as the best man and Ray officiating. It was simple, intimate, exactly what they both wanted. Maria cried through the entire thing, and even Ray got misty-eyed when Ethan and Lena exchanged vows they'd written themselves. "I promise to see you," Ethan said, holding Lena's hands. "Every day, in every moment. I promise to show up, even when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you, not around you. And I promise to love you with everything I've got for as long as I've got. I promise to let you see me, Lena replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. To be honest about what I need, what I want, who I am. I promise to stand beside you as a partner, not behind you as support. I promise to fight for us when things get hard, and to celebrate with you when things are good. And I promise to love you, Ethan Cole, exactly as you are. When they kissed, Mason cheered so loud it startled the horses, and everyone laughed, and it was perfect in its imperfection. That night, after the guests had left and Mason had finally crashed from excitement and too much cake, Ethan and Lena stood together in the house that was now truly theirs. Not his, with her fitting in, but theirs, built together. We did it, Lena said softly. We actually did it. Had doubts? Every day at the beginning, less now. She leaned into him. Thank you. For what? For fighting for this. For not giving up when I left. For choosing to be brave when it would have been easier to stay numb. Thank you for coming back. For giving me another chance. For seeing something in me worth salvaging. You were always worth it. You just couldn't see it yourself. They stood there in the quiet house, holding each other, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief, the loss, the years of numbness followed by the painful awakening. It hadn't been easy. It had been messy and hard and uncertain. But standing there with Lena in his arms, in a house that finally felt like home, with a kid sleeping upstairs who had two people who loved him completely, Ethan understood that the hard things were often the most worthwhile. He'd spent 5 years hiding from life, convincing himself that safety was enough. And then Lena had walked away, shattering his comfortable numbness, forcing him to feel again. It had hurt. It still hurt sometimes. But it was also the best thing that had ever happened to him. Because on the other side of that pain was this. Love that was real and complicated and worth fighting for. A partner who challenged him and supported him and refused to let him disappear into himself. A family that was whole in a different way than before, but whole nonetheless. What are you thinking about? Lena asked. How lucky I am. How close I came to missing this because I was too scared to reach for it. But you didn't miss it. You're here. We're here. Yeah, we are. Outside, the Montana sky was full of stars, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. The ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms, familiar and comforting. And inside the house, Ethan Cole held his wife. His wife, still strange and wonderful to think, and felt grateful for every difficult step that had led him here. To this moment, this life, this love. The next morning, he woke to Lena already up, coffee made the strong way he'd finally admitted he preferred. Mason was at the table working on homework he'd forgotten about, and Lena was helping him, patient and kind. When she noticed Ethan in the doorway, she smiled, that quiet, real smile that had always been there, waiting for him to see it. Morning, she said. Morning. He moved into the kitchen, kissed her, ruffled Mason's hair. And as he stood there in the early light, surrounded by the people he loved in the home they'd built together, Ethan understood something fundamental. The best things in life were never the ones that came easy. They were the ones you fought for, the ones you earned through courage and honesty and the willingness to be vulnerable. Lena had been right there all along, invisible only because he'd refused to look. But he was looking now, he was seeing, and he would never take for granted again the gift of being seen in return. This was home. Not the ranch, not the land, not the legacy of 3 generations. This, the woman beside him, the kid at the table, the life they were building together, imperfect and real, and exactly what he needed. This was home. And finally, after years of just surviving, Ethan Cole was truly alive.